I can never describe the love I have for my son. There are no words.
Through anguished tears, a father made a desperate plea.
Who can help me? Who can help? I just need help.
That was David Goldman on Dateline 6 weeks ago, crestfallen. This was David a few days ago, grateful as he listened to passionate speeches supporting a House resolution that calls on the Brazilian government to immediately return his abducted son, Sean.
Brazil's only legitimate and legal option now, as it has been, is to effectuate Sean's return, and it must be done now.
This is not what the world should be about. The world should be about trying to bring families together.
The resolution passed unanimously.
On this vote, the yeas are 418, the nays are 0.
Who is ready to bring Sean home?
And yesterday, hundreds of people, many who travel by bus from New Jersey, gathered in Washington, D.C. for a rally to offer David more support.
I just felt so moved by what this poor man has gone through. I felt like I had to come here and just be a part of this.
Their voices echoed onto the lawn of the White House, where President Obama, who was meeting with Brazil's President Lula, also raised David's case.
Bring Sean home! Now! Bring Sean home!
For David, a former international model from New Jersey, the mounting political pressure is humbling. But he says he's been living a nightmare ever since June of 2004, when his wife Bruna took 4-year-old Sean on vacation to her native Brazil and never came back. For years, his only contact with his son was an occasional phone call.
Dada?
Yeah?
I love you forever.
I love you forever, buddy. We're best friends. Who's your best friend?
You.
Bruna.
Last August, the story took a shocking turn when Bruna died after giving birth. That made David Sean's only surviving biological parent. But Bruna's second husband, a Brazilian lawyer whose specialty is family law, got a court to give him temporary custody, saying Sean needed stability. And he did it without even bothering to notify David that Bruna was dead.
The cruelty continues.
David's story outraged Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey.
I'm a dad. I know what it's like to love and cherish your children. My own involvement began when I actually saw the Dateline show. And when David made his appeal at the end of the show,
I just need help.
Both my wife and I were so moved. I was on the phone the next morning.
I mean, you've been the congressman for many, many years. We sat down and he looked me right in the eyes and he said, next time you have to go to Brazil, I'm going with you. Wherever you go, I go, and wherever I go, you go. Like brothers.
Just 3 days later, the congressman was on a plane with David, headed to Brasilia, Brazil's capital city. Smith had a stern message for Brazilian officials. A reminder that by not returning Sean, the country is violating a treaty that deals with international parental-child abduction.
The reputation of Brazil is on the line here, and abductions are serious crimes. And, international treaties are sacred. This isn't rocket science. This man needs to be reunited with his son.
As David accompanied Smith to meetings with key Brazilian officials, he clung to a collection of photos and cards. Bruna had given him this one just 6 months before she took off with Sean.
You are my real love. Underline. I love you with all my heart. Happy anniversary. I did nothing but love my wife and son.
The lonely moments, the quiet tears and deep breaths. It's all part of what has become a sad daily routine for David. But one of his greatest tests came at a tense court hearing, where he came face-to-face for the first time with João Paulo Lindsay Silva, the man battling him for his son.
They were facing each other, and David would look him in the eye. You'd see that he was close to tears a few times, but he held that in check.
Though the press was kept in the hallway, Congressman Smith was allowed to observe. After 5 long hours, he emerged with hopeful news.
I think we've had a very positive first step outcome today. Thankfully, David will have the opportunity to visit his son.
Finally, after 4.5 devastating years, David allowed himself to exhale just a little, imagining his little boy back in his arms.
Yippee!
Yippee! I'm gonna lay my eyes upon my son and try to do whatever I can to keep it together.
In court, Lindsay Silva had agreed to the visitation, but as David prepared to see Sean, who is now 8 years old, his emotions fluctuated wildly, from excited anticipation to frightened skepticism. He had been granted visits before, but never got to see his son. Bracing himself for another letdown, he asked Congressman Smith to come along for emotional support. But the only emotion that February morning was joy, as a father and son tenderly reunited.
Gave a wave and a smile, and I just walked over, and then I ran and picked him up. And hugged him. Told him I loved him, I miss him. It was beautiful. We just started talking. I just kept looking at him. I couldn't take my eyes off him.
I took this picture about an hour, 1 hour, after their first reunion, after 4.5 years. The joy on both of their faces, as I think all can see, is compelling.
David and Sean's deep bond was not only intact, it was as if they'd never been apart at all.
Sean started calling me Dad and Dada. First he called me Dada, and then he started calling me Dad, which I just wanted to bawl and start crying like, oh my God, I hadn't heard that in so long. We were in the pool and he was climbing all over me, and at one point he said, hug me with maximum force. Hug me with maximum force. And he's just laughing really hard, and, just for a second, and he goes, again, maximum force. So I squeezed him again, and he goes, again, maximum force. So I squeezed him again, and I just didn't ever want that to stop.
But it was so bittersweet. Along with joy, David saw pain and confusion on his little boy's face.
He's tormented. And he's conflicted. Why won't they just let me go home with him? Why would they do this to us for this long? Why did they do that to him?
And after 2 days of visiting for several hours at a time, David had to say goodbye again, not knowing when he'd be back.
We both just turned at the same time, and our eyes locked. And neither of us said a word, but that connection's there. Just locked. I feel so bad for him.
Emotionally drained, David took a red-eye back to New Jersey and immediately got on a train to Washington, D.C., where he met privately with Congressman Smith and Brazil's ambassador to the U.S. David's fight for Sean was about to escalate to a fever pitch at the highest levels of government. And with the Brazilian family who was fighting to keep Sean finally speaking out, it would become more contentious than ever.